All right, welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my preview for the 2025 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. A little bit late getting this preview out, but can't be helped. Sometimes life gets in the way. So with that being said, let's take a look at our circuit layout. So Sector 1 of the Baku Street Circuit, basically 90-degree corners, all three to the left, and then of course one to the right. And then of course you have the end of that big main DRS zone going down the main straight. But then you also have that second DRS detection zone going down kind of the back straight going into turn 3, which can provide a reasonable opportunity to overtake. Then getting into Sector 2, this is obviously where you have the very tight castle section. We have seen some crashes there, I think notably twice in 2019 in qualifying, once with Kubica and once with Leclerc, quite infamously, but we've never seen a crash there in a Grand Prix. Then you have this pretty high-speed section from turns 12 to 15, basically a series of left-handed kinks, and then down turn 15, a very tricky downhill left-hander. You will see, I think this week, and almost certainly you'll see at least one driver end up on the barriers on the outside of that corner. But yeah, that's a very, very tricky corner, and if you've ever played the F1 games, you would know that for sure. Then you get to the end of Sector 2, and basically it's just that short straight down to turn 16. And again, making sure you have a really good exit out of that turn 16, which is the start of Sector 3, is really important to being able to get a really good top speed, and also for overtaking into the first corner on the following lap. And again, you have that kind of very, very long straight that isn't quite as straight, and that is one of the longest basically continuous non-braking zones on the F1 calendar. Now, in terms of circuit stats, 6.003 kilometers, we're expected to have 51 laps on Sunday. The race lap record is a 1:53.009 set by Charles Leclerc in 2019. I think a bit of a chance that we could maybe see that race lap record broken this year, but again, it will depend on track conditions and the weather. Now, average speed at that lap is 209 kilometers an hour, which, despite Baku's reputation for being a very high-speed track, low downforce, it does only rank 19th of the 24 tracks on this year's calendar, and that is because so many of the corners at Baku are so slow. Now, downforce rating between 0, which is very lowest downforce, to 1, which is highest downforce, I have it rated at 0.04, so very, very close to low downforce, similar to Monza. And again, around the lap, full throttle for 76%, which makes sense, and a corner tendency of slow, so predominantly slow 90-degree corners. In terms of the racing at the Baku Street Circuit, I think despite the fact that you have that massively long DRS zone, because of the fact that you have, through a lot of the corners, there's only one line through them, it means that it's very hard for cars to follow each other. Dirty air is a pretty big problem here, and because the rear wings are so trimmed out more often than not, means the DRS is a little bit less effective. Now, of course, the one thing that can spice things up around here is that it does have a habit of safety cars and crashes, but to be honest, when I looked at the stats for this, it was actually a lot less than I thought it was. And so when we look at the safety car percentage, I'm just going to skip down to that stat because we're talking about it now, 57%, which again is a little bit lower than I think Baku's, than you would think based on Baku's reputation. Of course, you had some really chaotic races 2017, 18, and then I think to a lesser extent 2021 as well. But that being said, when you have a crasher, it tends to be a pretty big one. It usually requires the safety car. Now, pole to win percentage is actually one of the lowest on the F1 calendar, only 25%. Last time the pole sitter won around here was in 2019, and that was Valtteri Bottas. Charles Leclerc, of course, has taken the last 4 poles at this track, has not won any of them. So again, that will contribute for some of it, and some of that was Leclerc getting subpar Ferraris on pole. Other times, like last year, I think it was just a matter of him just not being able to convert it into the win. Now, rookie qualifying percentage is 46%, which is actually pretty high. It's 4th in the 24 tracks on this year's calendar. A bit of a surprise there, but it is a track that is on the support series, so the F2 drivers generally have quite a bit of practice driving here. And by F1, as far as F1 standards go, it is a newer race. Our first race here was 2016, so almost a decade ago. Now, tires for this weekend, we're going with the 3 softest tires in the Pirelli range, soft C6, medium C5, and then the hard C4. I think these are really the tires that we should have had at Monza last weekend, could have spiced up the race quite a bit. but it'll be interesting to see how things go this weekend. That being said, it should still be a pretty easy one-stop race. Now, weekend schedule, FP1, 12:30 in the afternoon, FP2 at 4 in the afternoon, and the weather for FP2 is expected to be 25 degrees and sunny. A bit of a colder weekend, I think, compared to most Baku Grand Prix, but that being said, cooler temperatures should mean less thermal degradation, which means perhaps cars might be able to follow a little bit closer, but it will also mean generally less degradation of the tires. So that will almost certainly mean that it's going to be a one-stopper unless a safety car or something completely wreaks havoc with the strategy and a bunch of cars decide that they have to pit very close to the end in order to have good purchase on their tires at the safety car restart. Now, Saturday, FP3, 12:30 p.m., and then qualifying at 4 p.m. Is this a sprint weekend? I don't think this is. It might be a sprint weekend, in which case the schedule is going to be completely wrong from what I've written. Anyway, we're just going to skip ahead and assume that there's no sprint this weekend. Anyway, yeah, qualifying at 4 p.m. and then, of course, you have the getting off track. Weather for qualifying expected to be 20 degrees and sunny. Then we get to Sunday, Grand Prix at 3 p.m. sharp, and again, cloudy for the Grand Prix with 20 degrees track temperature. So pretty low track temperatures. I think teams like Williams, which have struggled with tire warm-up and qualifying, I think will really struggle in qualifying. But again, this having the air temperature be so low for the race day will mean that it will neutralize one of McLaren's bigger advantages, which is, they have better tire degradation than the other front-running cars. So again, it means that I think there is an off chance that you might have a non-McLaren win this weekend. Now, 2024 race, Oscar Piastri, of course, won his second race of his career, second race of the season. Second was Charles Leclerc, and George Russell was in third. Now, a couple big talking points on the race. Of course, this was Oliver Behrman's stand-in race after Kevin Magnussen became the first driver to receive a race ban under the current penalty point system, which I, of course, talked about in my last preview, because, of course, that was when Magnussen got his ban. Now, of course, for the race, two big talking points were that one, of course, Piastri got past Leclerc, overtaking him on track into turn one in a very aggressive, bold move. And then the other was that very, very close towards the end of the Grand Prix. You, of course, had that pretty big crash between Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez, fighting over the final spot on the podium, taking both drivers out and allowing George Russell to pick up the pieces. And of course, Piastri came home for his second Grand Prix win in the season, and of course, his real, kind of first real Grand Prix win, given that his first was kind of, overshadowed by, McLaren trying to manage the race, something that they've been doing quite a lot this year. I just want to check the schedule to make sure that it is not indeed not a sprint this weekend. Yes, normal sprint weekend. I think it must have been last year or the year before. That was a sprint. For some reason, I was thinking it must have been possibly a sprint weekend. So, moving on. So, best qualifiers at this track. Now, number one is Fernando Alonso, plus 22% compared to his career average. And that is, in fact, for Alonso, he's actually never been out-qualified at this track. So, and given his record against Stroll this year, I think that's probably a pretty safe bet to continue this year. Median qualifying gap for Alonso is 3.5 tenths of a second, so pretty strong there. Number two is Pierre Gasly, plus 20%. Median qualifying gap, very impressive, half a second. So very, very good here over one lap. And then third is Charles Leclerc, plus 18%, not a big surprise there. Median qualifying percentage of 4.5 tenths of a second, which given quality of Leclerc's teammates during his time in F1 is, a pretty impressive record as well. Now, in terms of worst qualifiers, the worst qualifier at this track is Carlos Sainz, negative 46%. Median qualifying gap of positive 0.336. Sainz has actually never out-qualified a teammate around this track. Of course, being teammates with Leclerc for 4 years will, have a part in that. But of course, he had quite a few other teammates before that. Kvyat, he was teammates with Hülkenberg here, teammates with Norris as well. Now, number two is Max Verstappen. Not a big surprise. He only has one Grand Prix win here, and of course, his teammate at the time, Perez, actually has 2 wins here, which is probably the only time that a driver has a teammate of Verstappen has had more wins at a track than he has, and of course, Ricciardo won in 2017 as well. But yeah, negative 41%, and then not even just that. His median qualifying gap is a positive 0.074, without even looking it up, at least for current tracks on this year's calendar, this is the only track where he has a positive compared to his teammate. Now, number 3, Nico Hulkenberg, negative 23%, and then meeting qualifying gap of positive 0.223. Now, predictions for qualifying this weekend. The 10 drivers who have predicted to out-qualify their teammates are Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Gasly, Behrman, Hadjar, Albon, and Bortoleto. I would say the gaps for Gasly and Bortoleto may be a little bit big, but again, we shall see. And I think maybe for Norris, Piastri as well, just because it seems like for the 2 McLaren drivers, it seems like pretty much every race weekend they're separated by less than a tenth. Now, for predictions, I think I could easily go with Max Verstappen win after he won last time out in Monza. But that being said, even if Red Bull have a slightly better car this weekend here than they've had in general for most of this season, the fact that this is a pretty poor track for Verstappen means that I think I'm not going to predict him on the podium. Now, for the win, I think I'm going to go with the 2 McLaren drivers just because it's a safe bet. And I think the general trend this year is that for the real limited circuits, Norris has been better than Piastri, so I'm going to predict Norris over his Aussie teammate. Now, for rounding out the podium, I think Leclerc is a pretty strong option. He's been very, very good here in qualifying historically, obviously. At Monza, they didn't quite get the setup right, but perhaps this time out at Baku, things will be a little bit better. So I am going to predict Leclerc to be third on the podium, but I think, Russell, it will be probably a 3-way fight between himself, Russell, and Verstappen. And again, you never can rule out Hamilton as well, but unfortunately for Hamilton, hasn't really been on the, close to challenging for a podium this year. So there you go. That is my preview for the 2025 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Thank you so much for watching, and